Good morning, Brianna. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, I put this date. You and I talked about you coming on this Anthony Blanco's like baby podcast, right? As we start to build this thing, whatever it ends up being. And I was just telling you earlier, like I'm not a podcaster. I'm a business coach, trainer, speaker that likes to do podcasts because I like to interview people that I find interesting and friends and people that have done some really cool stuff. And I would say, Brianna, that you fall into all those categories
Oh, well,
of those
thanks.
things. And I'll let Brianna like share because it's me interviewing her. So I want Brianna to share um, how we met and kind of we'll start there and then we'll just jam out because Brianna's going to share some stuff with you. She specializes in the dental field, but the principles that she is going to share are can be used across all businesses, right? So I want to make sure that everybody understands that. So as she shares these things, if you're listening to this, whether you're in a corporation, a CEO, you're a director, you are somebody that's trying to get a raise in a job, and it doesn't even need to be dental specific, but what it can be is if you listen to the principles that she's going to share, you need to write those down on how to advance your business or advance your career or advance yourself as a person or a professional. Does that sound fair?
Awesome. Let's do it.
All right. So, Brianna, it's now your show. Tell the audience how we met.
So, we met a few years ago before my office that I work for decided to bring on a practice and go through a merger. And I think I remember giving you a blunt and curt interview when we first met about what are you going to do for us?
Oh my gosh, did she ever like Brianna? It would crack me up. Like she's a firecracker. Like I don't not too often when I bring on a new client, when I'm talking to like what I called Brianna over there's like a growth engineer. And so in her position, I get on the horn with her and we're sitting on a Zoom, just kind of like we are today. And she's like, yeah, so what do you do? Like, I don't believe you. Like, I've worked with people like you. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so then you take it from there. You said, prove to me. And I just did one little exercise. Do you remember what that exercise was?
I don't, but I do remember this thing, and I'm just like, tell me how you're going to help us. Like, I want to see what you're bringing to the table.
Yeah, yeah, and it was. And what I think I showed her there was this practice management or not the practice management software, but a dashboard. And I said, "Hey, pull this up real quick." And she did. And I said, "Okay, I want
Yes.
you to look at this thing." And she did. And I said, "Okay, now you see this, this, and this." And it uncovered like a ridiculous amount of opportunity revenue to bring into the business. And you're like, "All right, got it." And I said, "That was only like 30 seconds, so let's go."
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's how
So
we met.
that's how we met. And then we worked together for a couple years as you being my coach.
Hmm.
While you coached me, I coached the business I worked for. And I learned a lot from you and a lot from coaching the business to the point where I decided to open my own coaching business. And so that's what
Yes.
I do now.
Yeah, and what is the name of your coaching business?
Brielle Consulting Group.
That sounds so pretty. Like
Thanks.
Brielle Consulting Group. That's awesome. All right. So today you wanted to share, you and I were talking and I said, okay, Brianna, I want you to share some of the gold because I appreciate Brianna in so many different ways that she has when she was working as an employee for her team, and now as a coach, but she still works with them in similar ways. But now she's working with other organizations, taking her talent and ability and skill and wisdom and applying it to these other businesses. But I want her to share what she feels are some of the foundational principles of success. So, Brianna, I want you just to start, and then you and I will have a conversation. I'm sure I'll ask questions in regards to whatever you share.
Okay. When I go into a business, I look at a lot of things, but there are like five things that I focus on first.
Okay.
So I look at team utilization. Are you utilizing your team to the fullest potential
Mm-hmm.
of your team? How are you working with technology? And are you incorporating it and using it to your advantage?
Yes.
Where's your leadership at and decision making within your leadership?
Mm-hmm.
Um, how do you communicate? I think that's like the number one um, either barrier or carrier to success is
Oh,
how
I
you
like that.
communicate in
Barrier.
your personal,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
or
everybody write that
professional.
down. Your communication. I want everybody to take a second to write that down. Sorry to interrupt, Brianna,
Okay.
because that's like one of those things. It's like a rap. Like when they have a bar, they call it like a rap, like a wait, something that just sounds really good. So say that again. Communication is either what?
It's either a barrier or a carrier to your potential success and
There
growth.
you go. Love it. That's awesome. Okay, got it.
And then specifically for dental offices, I do coach businesses as well, but for dental offices, underutilizing your assistance and hygiene is something I see a lot and I like to bring out because the more you can empower your team below you, the further your business is going to go.
Absolutely. Okay, got it. Well, let's rock and roll. Start with the first topic.
So, team utilization,
Hmm.
and we're talking dental today. A
Okay.
lot of dental practices don't leverage their team to their strength. So, find your aces in your places. How are you delegating the administrative staff, the clinical staff, the leaders within the group? Do you have a structure? Cross training has been really beneficial for the teams I've coached and the team that I work with one on one. Just having, if the front office calls off and the assistant knows how to help, or if we're short clinical team and the front office knows how to help flip rooms and set rooms up, like that goes a really long way to make a day of a skeleton crew not feel like it to the patients. Um, and then just expanding the roles and letting people do everything to their highest potential.
Okay. So now, one of the things I want to touch on that real quick. You said more or less put the aces in their places. Okay. So when I hear that, what I think is well, number one, every human being has a different skill set, ability, and talent. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're working with a team, you identify your aces or you identify the team, you identify their talents. And I do believe from last time we talked, you put them through some type of process to identify specific traits, skills, mentality, attitude, all that kind of stuff that lets you know the aces to put in their places. Is that correct?
Completely.
Okay.
And aces in their places goes all the way down to the people you hire for your cleaning crew, all the way up to the doctors that you have in your office. Like everybody needs to be an ace in their place and they fit in somewhere.
Okay.
Um, I recommend having we use what's called the Neo test. So we
Okay.
have every single employee tested for their personality and it's a very in-depth test and we get the results back and we go over them with the proctor of the test and the employee also goes over them with the proctor of the test. And it's not like some people get freaked out when I talk about it in the interview process. It's not like whether or not we're going to hire you. If we're paying for this assessment, we're going to hire you, but it's to know where do your strengths and weaknesses lie. So like I remember we did a front office and they like through their personality test, it was like, okay, this person feels a lot of compassion, a lot of empathy. They like when the person across from them is hurting, they're hurting. And
Okay.
so that would not be a good person to put in a treatment coordinator role because when the patient is across from them feeling stressed about the finances or really upset about the condition of their mouth, they're going to take on that feeling and it's going to like weigh on them. So they might be really, really good at greeting people and being awesome on the phone, but they're not going to be really good about talking about your treatment and your finances and having emotional conversations.
Right.
Um, and that's just one example of how you can utilize it. But, like you talk a lot about builders and busters.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Like some people are really, really driven to be leaders and they want to be leaders. They want to take charge. And some people are really awesome about getting the work done and busting it out. And that's where their happy place is. So figuring that out too, like you don't want to put a buster in a builder spot. You don't want to put a builder in a buster spot. They're not going to be happy and they're not going to be as efficient and help your practice grow
Yeah.
like they would if they were in the right place.
Yeah, I just had a conversation with a mentor yesterday, and what he had shared with me because I'd been working with some of my own team members with my own business, And I'm like, hey, I'm going to train you up to coach people like I coach people, like, because I want to duplicate leadership. I want to duplicate myself. And what I think I've done over the last year is I made a mistake, right? So I'm okay with saying I made a mistake. I made a mistake with trying to not make them, trying to teach people how to think like me, right? And so essentially, what I have asked people to do is be a fish, but climb a tree, right? Because their skill set and their God given gifts and abilities and mine are different. And so I was talking to my mentor about it, and he said, listen, and he brought up this John Maxwell principle, and he said, listen, you can have they may be a number one in coaching, and on a scale from 1 to 10. So they may be a number one in coaching, like people, humans, thoughts, strategy, stuff like that. And you're spending a year, 80% of your time, whatever it is, a week, trying to coach the person to be or think like you, and you double their production. So they go from a 1 to a 2, right? And then he
Yes.
goes, and I'm like, okay, got it.
Yes.
He goes, now that doesn't mean that they're not good. He goes, but they have their own gifts and abilities and talents. And so you could take them and their other abilities, they're 5. And if you double them at their 5, the thing that they're naturally good at, they grow to a perfect 10.
Yes.
Right. So I'm like, got it. So when we're building teams, it makes me start to think, how do we build a team based upon their mentality and their skill ability and their natural tendencies by turning them into the ace and then put them in the right place. So,
Yes.
yeah,
What that reminds me of is it's like as you go through leadership or management or um, directing places, like you figure things out as you go. And one of the big ahas for me that I say all the time to myself now is don't ask a giraffe to be an elephant.
that's
Like
right.
it's if this person is not that, like you said, you're going to spend so much time and energy trying to get them to be that, and it's not going to get you anywhere.
That's right.
So meet them where they are and know what their skills are, and there's a place for all of them within your team, but find that place. Don't try to make it work.
Yeah. Now, is there a example or a story that comes to mind of somebody that you've worked with that was in a position? We'll call them. It was a giraffe trying to be an elephant, but then you put them in the right environment and they flourished. Does anything come to mind right off the top of your head?
Completely. I can think of an assistant that I've worked with who we use CEREC technology. And our assistants, if you use a CEREC, you have to pack cord around your buildup. And there's a lot of steps. Like if you're assisting our doctors with that, our doctors empower the team to do a lot. So you're packing cord, you're designing the crown, you're designing the margins. The doctor comes in and just polishes, like you set it up for them and they close the deal basically.
Hmm.
And we for a long time had a philosophy of like, okay, if you're whatever your weakness is, we're going to throw that at you all day long. So if you're good at fillings and you're good at seeing assisted wellness and you're good at deliveries and limiteds, but you're really bad at crowns, then you're going to do crowns all day long.
Hmm.
And we did this to an assistant and she just was not getting it. And then when we finally stopped having her do the crowns, because we were like, it kind of gives you a headache a little bit whenever you're constantly getting called in to help or the patient's appointments running longer. And we finally just let her do what she was good at. It was like, we have 3 other assistants who can do crowns. Why are we doing this?
Right.
Another example is we had a front office who was an insurance coordinator doing data and statistics and just data entry basically. And we, by a fluke, put her into a treatment coordinator role. And she had like a 50% case acceptance without training.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it was like, okay, this person can do data entry, but what they're just naturally good at is talking to people and helping them realize why they should get their treatment done. So
Yeah.
I've definitely seen it. And when you're in the management or leadership role, something that we do at our office is if you're not reaching a level 10 in one area, we try a lot of different areas for you. And it's crazy when you finally get the click, you know it pretty quickly.
Right. Right. That's good. I like it. Like, and so what's neat about that is, and I used to tell people this is like, I can go into a business when I'm coaching them. And even a long time ago and a lifetime ago, we used to buy and flip homes. And there was a point in time that we could walk up to a house and we could just see what was happening with the house. We could walk from room to room and everything kind of lights up with everything that needs to happen. And so, from a hearing, as a leader in a business, whether you're an owner, director, you are a business manager, a practice manager, whatever it may be, is the ability to be able to see people for their skills and abilities and put them in the right spot is actually one of the most important things that you can do when running a business.
Yes,
Yeah, got it.
completely.
Awesome. All right, what's the next one?
For me, the next one is technology. So, business, dental, doesn't matter what you're in, technology is here. And if you're not using it to your advantage, that's a disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
So like specifically in dental, um, using intraoral cameras, for example, to let the patient see what you see, or having a CEREC. Like if you're a dental office and you do crowns and you don't have a CEREC, you're doubling your chair time for those patients. You're making them come to 2 different appointments. You're paying a lab to do your costs instead of having it in-house. And that doesn't really make sense. And then the last thing is newer to the technology field, but AI is here,
Yes, it is.
and it can be used as a tool and not just as a end all be all. So like there's a system called Pearl
Mm-hmm.
for dental offices that I have found it to be really useful for new team members. So if you're a team that's wanting to grow, and you don't have like 15-year experience employees, using that to help your team understand what you're seeing on the X-ray versus having to constantly have conversations and coach your clinical team up, like all of these pieces of technology, if you're not using them, you're behind the ball and your dental office just isn't going to grow as fast as if you embrace those pieces of technology.
Right. And so the technology you're talking about, because there's all kinds of technology to use, is so far it's been more on the clinical side, right?
Yes.
So there is technology though on the let's call it the management side, KPIs, key
Oh,
performance
yes.
indicators. And so go into a little bit on that as far as how important like a dashboard is to a business with technology.
Yeah, so there's tons of different softwares out there for dental dashboards, and that is one of the things that I had intended to talk about is KPIs, because if you don't know where you are, you don't know where to go. And if
Mm-hmm.
you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're starting from. So,
Right.
like, one of my big things is, and this is not uncommon for people to hear, work smarter, not harder, and be highly efficient in your role. So, if you are a hygienist, for example, one of the KPIs that we look at is hygiene reappointment. We want it to be around 90%. We want 90% of our patients to be reappointed for their next visit while they're sitting in your hygiene chair before they walk out of the room.
Right.
It takes so much less time to find a spot for them right now when they're in the chair and you're talking to them than it does to call them 3 times, send them a text message, play phone tag, and try to get them later.
That's right.
And it's also easier for the patient. If you want a 4 o'clock spot and that's, the highly desired spot, or you want an 8 a.m. spot and you book that 6 months in advance, you're going to find that. If
Yeah.
we're trying to call you the day of, we're going to be on the phone with you for 10 minutes trying to find a spot for you to get in because you've called last minute. So, and that's just one piece of it. Like, what is your case acceptance? If you're presenting $100,000 a month and only $5,000 is getting accepted, we have a really big problem with education on the team. We need to figure out how to educate the patient. So,
Right.
yes, there's even technology of like, how do you communicate with your patients? So what software are you using to communicate? Or do you have the ability to text? Can the patient send you pictures? One of the huge areas of efficiency for my office was getting a piece of technology for the front office that the patients can actually send us a picture for several reasons. Send us a picture of your insurance card. We don't have to play phone tag when you give us the wrong number, you give us the wrong phone number, the group number, the member ID, because you don't know, they're patients, they don't know how to read it.
Right.
Or save yourself the time and send us a picture of your mouth. What is it that you're talking about? It can help us get you in and be more efficient on our schedule. So there's a lot of times where our implant patients, their healing abutment will fall out and they think the whole implant has fallen out. We can reduce their anxiety and stress to let them know your implant is still in place if you send us a picture of it. And we know how to appropriately schedule you back. Like if your implant really did fall out, we got a problem. That's a different appointment than if your healing abutment fell out. Or even for emergency exams, like there are some times where they do need to come in and they do need to be seen. And then there's sometimes where we're able to just talk them through something just by them sending us pictures over the phone. So the offices that I work with that don't have that texting capability, look at the phone time in a phone call where you have to ring, wait for them to answer, go back and forth in the communication versus sending a text message that takes 10 seconds to type out. It's hugely impacts your efficiency when you embrace technology and use it to your benefit.
Right. And so, and again, I know Brianna right now specifically talking about dental practices, but I always tell people this is what she is talking about are principles, right? And so when she talks about the using the technology to maintain a better communication with their patients, I always tell other businesses is what technology are you using to maintain contact with your clients or customers, right? So what ends up happening is usually people need to hear from you 7 to 11 times in order to either be reminded or to confirm what they're going to do, whether it's a purchasing decision or an appointment that was set up, whatever it may be. And when we rely on humans to remember to follow up, is we are highly distracted creatures. Right.
Yes.
We also are highly emotional creatures. So I hear all the time, whether it's in a dental practice or in a business, people are like, well, I don't want to offend them. Like, they're like, I don't want to make them mad. And I'm like, okay, so listen, how many people do you talk to on a regular basis? And I always break it down. Again, whether it's a regular business or a dental practice, and they're like, well, we probably see through the office per day, we might see like, I don't know, let me throw out a number, 100 people through here every single day. And I was like, that's 500 people a week. That's 2,000 people a month, roughly. And one person gets mad at you. One person gets mad at you, and you want to base your activities and how you feel based upon one person, right? Now, that's a whole different podcast talking about the psychology of the human mind and why they're worried and why they feel judged and why they feel like, anyways, that's a whole different thing. But utilizing technology removes us, right? Our minds, will, and emotions, and we get to automate it in order to appropriately serve our patient or client in the best manner. Does that make sense?
Completely. It actually reminds me of like one of the things that a digital dashboard can tell you, depending on which one you have, is like how often your schedule is full, what your cancellation rate is, and what your reappointment rate is for those cancellations, or how often are you filling last minute openings.
Right.
And so even with that, like I know in our office, we have had before, like we put patients on the VIP list, which is the ASAP list, whatever you want to call it. You want to get in sooner, and you want this certain spot, we've got you on the list, we'll reach out to you. And just what you said, it's a constant conversation piece that comes up is like, these patients asked to be on the ASAP list or the VIP list.
Right.
We told them when they asked that we will text you. You don't have to respond to the text if you're busy. If you can't take it, that's fine. Don't respond. We're gonna text a bunch of people, and
Right.
first come, first serve, whoever gets it. So when we're looking at how many of our openings did we fill, if it's not very many, I'm asking myself, are we texting the patients, or did we get back into that routine of, oh man, I just texted them yesterday, so I don't want to text them today, which is that human emotion that then we have to have that conversation again of, hey, they're on the list and they want to be texted, send them all the openings. The worst thing they can do is say no. And if they get to a point where we're offending them, then we can simply take them off the list, and they have that control. So yes, there's a lot technology across the board, from front to clinical to the doctors. There's so many systems that can help you and can reduce the human emotion or human tendency or human forgetfulness
Yes.
that we all suffer.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a follow-up structure for what I do, touching base with people like you and other people, and I put it. It's on my calendar, and so it shows up as a to-do list. And I gotta make my dark blue square turn into a light blue square because I have to check off the box to make sure that I follow up. And what I always tell people, it's the power of being pleasantly persistent.
Yes.
And that is what we want to do, is be very pleasantly persistent. Somebody gets angry at you for follow up and you just say, hey, no problem, I do appreciate your feedback, so we can serve you best. How do you recommend that I follow up with you in the future? And usually that completely disarms people, because people these days are waiting for conflict and they look for argument. And when you just say, "Hey, I totally appreciate your feedback. I really thank you for that. Let me know how I can best serve you." Like, they just don't know what to do. Like, their brain's like,
Yes.
"Ah," right? And then they come down and they just start having a normal conversation with somebody, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Completely.
Good, good. I like all that. And so again, I'm going to translate everything for everybody all the time, but Brianna sharing business principles, right? Follow up, structure, technology, use technology for leverage. AI is here to stay, right? It's not something I tell people it can be used for good and evil, right? We know that, just like anything else can be. I
Yes.
mean, I think I read a statistic like a long time ago. People are like, oh, guns this and guns that. But in reality, I think it's like more people are killed by like knives, okay, in the United States. So we're going to take everybody's knives away, right? Now
Yes.
you can cut your steak with a fork, right? That's the way we're going to move forward in the United States, right? So what we want to take this new technology, we want to learn it, we want to embrace it, we want to make sure that we're hitting up conferences, that we're listening to webinars, that we're hiring Brianna to talk about these things that will help us like X times our business or practice, right? So we have to think different about how to 10 times our business. And Brianna is one of those folks that is always thinking with that 10 times thought process. All right, next one.
So leadership and decision making is obviously, like, that's really one of the foundations to begin with of every business.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Lots of things within that, like, are roles clear? Do we make timely decisions? Do we have consistent policies? Are there policies in place to begin with?
Mm-hmm.
And are the people in the leadership roles truly leaders, or do we have a giraffe in an elephant spot where we need to figure that out?
Right.
So, like, if leadership is unclear, decisions are not made swiftly, confusion happens, inefficiency happens. It all starts with the top and goes down.
Absolutely.
So that's something that I look at pretty immediately when I come into a business, and that is the area where you have to coach or pivot and find a new spot to go find the ace for the place, because the leaders are going to a good leader is going to empower their team so that their team is leaders too.
Right. Right. That's so leadership is duplication. And what I tell most leaders is that if you're not getting what you want, okay, so I'm like, I'll tell this to an owner of a company or a practice or business manager, and they're like, well, people just won't do blah, 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 blah. And I go, okay, great. Okay, here's what I want you to do. I'm like, make sure to write this down. They're like, all right. So I'm like, go get a piece of paper. All right, got it right here. Got this piece of paper. I said, okay, first step. Okay, get up from your desk. Okay, got it. I'm gonna write this down. Okay, so I got up. All right, now what I want you to do is I want you to go to the bathroom. They're like, go to the bathroom? Just go to the bathroom, okay? If you don't want to go to the bathroom, I need you to pull your phone out. Okay, so I'm gonna pull my phone out. Okay, now turn it on. I want you to do this, but I need you to turn it on selfie mode. Okay, turn on selfie mode. Are you looking at your phone? Yes. There's the problem. You see it? Do you see the
Yes.
problem? And they're like, Blanco, right?
Yep.
But in reality, like, if there are problems with our business or our people, you'd said this earlier, everything starts with leadership. And John Maxwell says in the Law of the Lid, and I paraphrase it a little bit, and maybe I've changed it just a little bit, but I still think it's the same thing, is that everything falls on the shoulders of leadership, right? So your business, your life, your professional impact, it will be limited by your current level of leadership. Right.
Yes.
So if I'm not getting what I want out of business or life, I have to look at myself in the what I call the leadership mirror and take a good hard look. And you said this earlier when you talked about the power of communication. It will
Yes.
do what, right? You said it will you'll either do a barrier
Yep.
or you will be a carrier, right? And then what was the second part, the third part of that, barrier or carrier
To success and growth.
to success and growth. And that goes back to leadership with clearly communicating to yourself and with your team, right? So again,
Completely.
if your team isn't doing what they want, I need you to go put your phone on selfie mode or go to the bathroom and give yourself a good hard look, because that's the reason why the team isn't doing what they're like. Well, I'm not hiring the right, or we're not hiring. There's no good people out there. I'm like, again, look in the selfie of your phone because you're in charge of the people. And we'll know it's Brianna, you know, it's Samantha, it's Tim, it's whoever, they hire them. Right. But again, you're the head of the organization. Have you guys sat down and created a system of hiring, talked about who you're going to bring in as a team? Well, no, we
Yes.
haven't. Got it. Okay. So go take care of that stuff.
Even like, there's a really long saying, and I don't have it in front of me, but it essentially comes back to taking 100% responsibility for absolutely everything.
Yes.
And this applies to everyone. So, like, if I say, hey, Anthony, can you please follow up with 3 people? It's 100% my responsibility to follow up with you that you followed
Right.
up with those people.
That's right.
Just like it's 100% your responsibility to follow up with them. And that is something where I would say sometimes I almost go to the extreme, and my team does now too, but it's a positive thing of how did I contribute to this? What could I have done differently? How could we have done something to change the outcome that we didn't like? And then not dwelling on what the outcome was, because it is what it is, the time has passed, but figuring out, okay, how are we going to pivot and what are we going to do different and how are we going to learn from this and grow as a leader together, knowing that next time now we have this tool in our toolbox of what not to do or how to do it differently.
Right.
But they're definitely like that is a pet peeve of mine. I don't let it be known it's a pet peeve of mine, but when I go into a business and I'm talking to a leader and they're like, well, I asked so and so to do it and it's been 3 months, I'm like, well, why did you let it go for 3 months? Like,
Right.
yes, you asked them, but this is the opportunity for you to coach them up and to talk to them and to empower that team member. As I said, it all starts from the top. And the more that you can be involved with your team and follow up with your team and communicate with your team, and clarify, like, you know, give people by wins. Hey, I need a report and I need it by Friday. If you can't have it by Friday, let me know. We'll talk about it. But I've now communicated everything I need so that I can't say like, oh, well, I asked them to do it. It's 3 months later and they haven't done it yet.
Right.
All of communication and leadership are like married hand in hand.
Yeah. Yeah. And you might remember this, because it's probably something I said and repeated. Communication is the response you get. You remember that at all? So communication is the response you get. And what people, they usually, it's kind of a weird phrase. So people are like, like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, okay, so if you ask somebody to do something and they didn't do it, then you have to ask yourself, did I inform them or did I communicate? Communication implies that action has occurred. Information is one-way directional. So where leaders get confused is they're giving information, there's no action taken, and they're like, they think they've communicated.
Yes.
And one of the biggest mistakes with communication is the illusion that it actually occurred.
Yes. That's, like, it takes me into the next topic of communication, which is there's internal communication, there's patient communication, there's documentation, like there's a lot of forms of communication. But when I'm talking to somebody about something for the first time, or introducing a new concept, or talking about something that might be complex, like asking them, hey, can you give that back to me? Like there's a two-way street here. I just gave something to you. I want to make sure that you heard what I said the way I wanted you to hear what I said. And it's really crazy how many times, like, we'll talk about something, like, for example, right now, one of my offices is going out of network with insurance, which is a big deal. If you're in the dental world, you know how big of a deal that is. And so we're working through talk tracks. We're going to send out a patient letter. What are the talk tracks for our front office of when the patient calls and asks questions, like, how are you going to answer them?
That's right.
So I gave it to the team. I asked the team, the front office team is who I was working with. I asked them to give it back to me. And one of the specific things that I had said, but they did not hear, was I had said, we're going to file their claims for them still. We are still taking care of insurance for them. And when they gave it back to me, they're like, okay, so they're going to file their own claims like this. And I'm like, okay, well, we got to back up. If you don't have that two-way communication where when you're done communicating, you ask for them to give it back,
right,
that's also a failure in the process, because you don't know what they heard. And it's good to make sure that you recap the conversation at the end so that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, there is a thing that I teach and again, some of the things that I'm going to say out loud, like Brianna's heard, right? But there is the sender and the receiver in communication, and the sender creates clarity and the receiver clarifies. And so
Yes.
that's what Brianna is talking about right now, is the sender is going to say a thing, and then the receiver needs to clarify through asking questions. What ends up happening is the sender will say a thing, the receiver goes like this, right? So they say, does that make sense? Do you understand? And the receiver, a lot of times, 60%, 70% of the times, they're nodding their head and they're thinking, I don't know what they're asking, but I don't want to look stupid.
Yes.
Right. So that's when Brianna is saying as well, even though you're sending the communication, they're supposed to ask questions to clarify. You're saying, as a leader in the communication, is that you have to verify that they really understand, not just look for a yes or no, head nod or a yes, but you're like, give it back to me in your own words. Then
Yes,
you
completely.
know that communication is actually happening. I won't say that it happened until the actual action happens.
Right.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I also think, like, in communication, you need to figure out, if when you're on the leadership side of things, you are the one teaching those that are part of your team. So you need to figure out how to be clear, how to be efficient. Something that I ask myself a lot is, does it need to be said? Does it need to be said by me?
Mm-hmm.
Does it need to be said by me right now?
Yes.
And that goes for, so I mean, that goes from, like I said, the front office to the assistant to the clinical team to the doctor. That's something you can ask yourself all the time when you're talking. But then also, like, is this the right space? Like, we all know the memes or the jokes on social media about, like, could have been an email. So, like, be aware of that, you know? Like, if you are not aware of your communication as a leader, you're not going to be viewed in the same way as if you are extremely intentional and you're aware and you are considerate of other people's time and the way they're going to receive it. Like, if I'm sending specific step-by-step detailed how-tos, I can go over that verbally, but it would be silly of me to think that they're going to completely comprehend it all. That would be a great email.
Right.
Just different things like that. Like, when you're having internal communication, oh gosh, it's just so huge. Like, you have to make sure everyone feels heard. You have to make sure problems are addressed. You have to make sure the workforce is harmonious. Like,
Right.
encourage open dialogue. Don't shut the team members down. Make it a place where everyone can have a voice. And even if we don't use the information that you brought to us, we still hear you and we see where you're coming from.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, is making people feel heard, especially right now. And I think this is one of the things that I've heard most about the younger generation is that they want to feel heard. They want a place to belong, but the way that they feel like they belong is if they've been heard, right?
Yes.
But it doesn't always mean that we're going to do what their idea is. It doesn't mean it's not valuable because they may see something that we don't see, but it also means that it may be something we really have done before, right? And
Yes.
so I heard this phrase the other day. I was listening to something. It's like a 22-year-old on YouTube appearing as an expert for relationship advice. Like they may say something in like 1 in 100 things that make sense, but most of it because they don't have the experience. And I don't want to take anything away from them.
Right.
But if I'm going to look for relationship advice, and especially if it was around marriage, I'm going to look for somebody that's been married for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, 75 years. That's who I'm going to, right?
Yes.
And in the same way, as we build our team, we want to make them feel heard because, again, they may be in their chair from what they see. They may see something we don't see, and they can give great feedback. But at the same time, we want to empower them, but we do not want to make them feel disempowered by making them feel unimportant. And I think
Completely.
that's a balance that a great leader has to always be inside of.
Yeah, one of the phrases that we have in our office is if there's an upset or an inefficiency, there's a missing or broken policy. And
Hmm.
so we give every single team member the voice to bring policy to us. So an example of this would be I got to think of one from recently, but like we just implemented a new piece of technology that confirms appointments with the patients. Um, and in doing so, it will send one auto reminder like 5 days before your appointment, and
Hmm.
that's it. And so we implement this, and then we have people who confirm their appointment or don't confirm their appointment on the schedule. But when I'm looking at tomorrow, I want to see all confirmed. I don't want to see anything unconfirmed. Confirm the schedule, text them, call them, email them, get them confirmed. And so it was figured out by one of the team members because, management and leadership has things they're focusing on, the team has things they're focusing on, and the team just said, like, hey, we're confirming them 5 days in advance and they're forgetting about their appointment. Like we
Right.
need to change it up. And so that was an area where it was like, okay, well, it's an inefficiency. It's not really an upset, but it's inefficient. So we're going to change up the system and see how it works. But that's an interesting example. There's lots of examples of our team bringing us upsets or inefficiencies, and we put a policy in place, and that stops it in its tracks. And it's like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm not going to have this angry patient anymore. I'm not going to have an angry team member because we empower them to have a voice. And as soon as a problem starts to become a pattern, it's taken care of and it's eliminated because everybody has eyes on it. It's not just the management titles that are there to help implement the policy. But in order to have this really awesome and efficient system on your team, you have to start with good communication.
Yeah, absolutely. Communication is key. I see that, and I think I read, it may be a made up statistic, but I think I read that like 80%, 86% of all conflict is miscommunication. And I see that all the time with the businesses that I coach and with my own team is that I'll see people communicate a thing and then the other person doesn't ask a question and then there's assumptions. And that goes in, you remember like the four agreements, right? Be
Yes.
impeccable with your word. Don't take things personally. Don't make assumptions, and always do your best. Like, and what I see people do inside miscommunication, the part about being impeccable with your word, like they communicate something that's different than what the actual person communicated. Because why? Because they're taking it personally, right? So they blow up number one and two, and then what do? Number three, they screw up number three because now they're making assumptions about what they think they heard based upon a
Yes.
story that they fabricate into the future, which causes drama, right?
Yes.
That's one of those things. That's why always love teaching the four agreements inside communication, because so much of what Brianna is talking about when we're communicating to our team, it's important. Like Tony Robbins says, the number one person, the most important conversation that you're going to have all day is with the person that you see in the mirror. right? That's the most important conversation all day, because if you talk to yourself right, then if your leader, your friends, your peers, other people are communicating to you, then you won't get messed up with any kind of self-judgment. You think they're judging you or you think they're coming after you because the way you already feel about yourself. But again, that's another podcast about human behavior and psychology and business. So, all right, let's roll to the next one.
The last thing that I have, like specifically for dental offices, it can apply to businesses too in its own way, but underutilizing the clinical team. Dental assistants and hygienists can take on much more than what they're often asked to do. And by allowing them to do that and empowering your team instead of being a lot of dentists have a tendency to micromanage, and they are perfectionists and they think that nobody can do anything as good as them. And that thought process will completely kill any growth that you have any potential of, because you only have so much time in a day. So if you want to be more efficient, if you want to have more production per hour or grow your practice, you have to let people do what they can do. We have on our team 9 operatories. And so we've got like 6 or 7 hygienists. We have 5 assistants. And one of the biggest things I see when I'm hiring people is that most of the clinical team that I hire they might have 15 years of experience, but they don't even compare to someone that's been on my team for 2 years, because they've never been allowed to do more than the very basic, simple things. Their doctors don't trust them and allow them to grow. Yeah. So, when you talk about your assistants, or clinical, this can apply to both, but letting them talk to the patient and educate them on what they're seeing. They didn't go to dental school, but they see the x-rays and they know what you're probably going to come in and say. Yeah. So if they can take the time to answer the patient questions, to educate the patient about what a filling is, what a crown is, what they're seeing in their mouth, why they might be experiencing pain. When you, the dentist, come in, you just have to bobblehead and agree with what they said. If you aren't going to let them do that, the amount of patients you can see in an hour goes from maybe being like 6 to 8 patients in an hour down to like 2, because you are requiring yourself to do everything. Right. Even with assistants, like depending on what state you live in, there's expanded functions. And even in the states that don't have those, like the assistants can get certified in things. They can learn things. Like I said, we use CEREC technology, and when we hire assistants now, I used to just ask whenever I hired them, like, are you familiar with CEREC? And the answer might be yes. And then they would come to our office and it was like, okay, they know what a CEREC crown is, but they don't know how to pack cord. They don't know how to scan the tooth. They don't know how to draw a margin. They don't know how to design the crown because their doctor never let them. And so again, just saying, like, the more that you can empower them, and obviously up to what's legal in your state, let the clinical team do, the better off you're going to be. And the biggest shortfall that I see is actually with hygienists. They can do a lot to save the doctor time. So if you're one doctor, and it depends on the state you're in, of how many hygienists can be running at one time while you're one doctor in the practice. In Illinois, it's 4. So if you have 4 hygiene columns running and you have 2 restorative columns running, and you empower your hygienists while you're doing your restorative, they are taking the x-rays on the patient. They're letting the patient know what they find because they know how to read x-rays. They're doing all of the education. They're doing preliminary findings. So they're coming up with a treatment plan for you to check. This is all for the dentist to go over, but they're doing the pre-work for you while you're working on a patient. And then you might go into a room, a hygiene room. You just got done working on a restorative side. You might go into the hygiene room. The hygienist has completely set you up for a slam dunk. They transfer it to you. Hey, I've got Anthony. This is what I found. We talked about this. I told him you would probably recommend XYZ, but I want you to look at the x-rays. While you're in there looking at the x-rays and going over that hygienist can hop over and get your next patient numb. Right. So when you're unwilling to let the hygienist get patients numb or let them talk to the patient about what they see or come up with preliminary findings, again, you can't see as many patients. Or if you are seeing that many patients, you're running behind and you're making the patients angry because you're not staying on schedule.
That's right.
So in the dental world, that's like, what if you're going to grow your practice and you're unwilling to let go of responsibility, you can just decide right now that you're not going to grow your practice because it's not going to happen.
Right. Yeah, I see that frequently. It was about a year ago, I was working with these. I mean, I'm still working with, actually, it's been almost 2 years. I've been working with them total. And at the very beginning of working with them, we talked about doing a delegation exercise.
Oh,
And
yeah.
right. And so it was less administrative stuff and more just on clinical things because the idea was to increase their production per hour, right? And in order to increase their production per hour, they had to follow exactly like the framework that Brianna's talking about right now, right? So they had to be able to leverage what they allow other people to do. And one of the biggest stucks, or it wasn't a stuck, they just had to have a new frame of reference to start to think from, is to go from what they were producing per hour to 2 times, is they had to give up smaller procedures. They had to use their hygienist in a different way. They had to really educate their assistants in a different way. And at that time, and I'll just kind of group the whole office in together, and you saw something similar to this as well, in a different way. But with these guys, what they did was is they were doing about in revenue dollars about 269,000 per month. And then after over a period of time, and then putting some things in place, because again, and you'll, this sounds familiar, Brianna, but it's
Yep.
not the office, right? But it's a different office. But after putting some things together in the fourth quarter last year, this year they went from 269 to they hit 1 month they hit 495 in revenue. They're probably going to hit either like 490 to 510 in revenue this month. And so all of a sudden you see what has been for 3 years of 269, all of a sudden it's almost double the amount of revenue that they used to do because they used what Brianna's framework to leverage their time, energy, professional ability, and then up leveled their skill set, right? And when you do those things, you see a dramatic difference. I mean, that's almost 100% increase in the amount of revenue to the business. And
Yes.
Brianna saw that too. So
Yeah.
like I always like telling that story, but I'm not going to tell it. I want Brianna to tell it because again, this is her interview. Even though Blanco likes to talk, but we're gonna have Brianna tell it because when her and I first started working and we're working on planning and stuff, she used a lot of the principles that she shared with today. Like I see it in my mind. I'm sure Brianna can see it. And I won't take her through all the details with it, but you started at a number and it was like in October and you started at a number. And do you remember what that number was?
I don't remember, but I want to say like it was around 260 a month.
So, oh my gosh, so about the same as the other business. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So she started about 260 a month, and then you started planning in October to make changes that really would have to really take place in their schedules. It took about 6 months, yes?
Yeah, 3 to 6 months because you've already got patients on the schedule. So for you to plan out and be proactive with your efficiency, it can't start tomorrow. But yeah, it started around 3 months, and then probably by like 6 to 8 months later. And this wasn't all completely Brianna, but a lot of it was being strategic with the schedule. We had months where we were hitting 450,000 in the month, and it didn't even feel like we were doing anything different from the 260 month.
Yeah. Now keep in mind that when Bria and I first had this conversation, she told me, I can't ask my team to do anything more. They're going to burn out. They already feel overworked. And then all I did was said, what if you thought differently about that? What would you do? That's all, that's all I said. She's like, what? And Brianna, and I want to tell everybody as a coach and as a person, Brianna's like the ultimate achiever. And so like she saw that I think as like a challenge. This is a challenge. And so she took that challenge on, and because of the things that she implemented over that period of time, is that they ended up and they were on $1 million increase run rate by I think it was like March, April, May, somewhere around there. But you develop that run rate of doing over $1 million more than the previous 12 months by implementing those things, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's just absolutely cool. And something else that I want to share about what you did and what I would say some business, and I'm curious about something. I'll share this with you, but I want your feedback because a lot of business owners or people or professionals, they don't look at things like this, but I think you do. And it's a very simple phrase is you do not plant and harvest in the same season.
Yes,
So all the work that you did in October, November didn't show up until March, April, May, right?
completely.
But what do owners, directors, some people, what do? They say
It's not working
it's
because
not
I don't see
working.
it right now.
That's right. That's right. So when you're working with a business, doctor or owner, whatever it may be, what would you say? And we've got about 5 minutes left. What would you say are like top three things to help them get out of their own way?
Um, to figure out your team, get your aces in your places, and that delegation exercise that you're talking about, that's
Yeah.
number one.
Yeah.
Be put yourself in a place where you are the creative head and the thinker and the planner and the organizer. You're not the doer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, work on empowering your team through it, like invest in your team. The more that you invest in your team, the more it's going to come back to you. And if you give what you get. So if you're keeping it all and you're not willing to give and you don't understand the value of that class or taking a day to have a team meeting and put back and fill their cup up, again, your loss. It's not
Mm-hmm.
going to be well for you.
Yes.
Um, and I think too, just like being open minded to having coaching. Um, a lot of people think they can figure it out themselves. They can YouTube it, they can Google it, and even the best people, like I'm sure, Anthony, that you have people who coach you. I know I have people who coach me, and books and whatever that we read. But if we're not open minded to growing and to saying, I don't know it all and I'm never going to know it all, and there's always going to be somebody who can give me something,
Absolutely.
um, that is going to hinder your growth, because if you think you know it all and you think you're done growing, you are.
Yes. It's true. Like if you think, yeah, that's exactly right. If you think you know it all, then you do because now you don't learn anymore. So you know all that you know because you are not going to learn anymore. So it's true.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
completely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. It's good stuff. So in the last couple minutes, last 3 minutes or so, what would you want to leave anybody with? Like, how do they contact you? What is like something that you have a burning desire, the last kind of thought that you want to give to people, that kind of stuff?
I would say if you're a business or a dental office and you don't have a coach or a consultant, or you have one that you're just at a lull with, you're not growing with, um, reach out. I would love to see how we could set goals and work together and have a different pair of eyes on things. Um, I have a website, www.brielleconsultinggroup.com. It's Briell, my first name and last name together. My email is brielleconsultinggroup@gmail.com. But I really love challenges, like Anthony said. And typically, if you throw the gauntlet down, I will pick it up and I will carry it. So working together is very exciting to me. When I get into a dental office, I geek out. I've been in dental for 10 years. I've went from a practice that had 2 associates to having, or 2 doctors in total, to having 6 doctors in total. We've bought another practice. I've seen it all. So I feel like I have a lot to offer. And once you've gone through the experience, like you said, once you've done it, you can give it back, and you can even say, don't make the mistakes that we made, or do the success in this way. This is how we had success. So yeah, I don't know. Dental is my favorite thing to talk about. I could talk about it for hours, and usually through the dental community or through the knowledge that we have or the coaches that I have access to, we can figure out a way to get the results that you want to get.
Absolutely. And I believe that because I got to work with Brianna and I got to see her do her thing. So it was absolutely awesome. All right. With that being said, so the information that Brianna shared as far as like how to get in touch with her, I'll put that in the show notes. Brianna, I do appreciate you joining me on this. And I'm always experimenting, like, and I appreciate my friends who will experiment with me on new technologies and things. And so on this Riverside podcast app thing, so I totally appreciate it. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you. You're a great person. You're a
Thank
great
you.
professional. And the reason why that I think that we stay in contact is because we're both in growth mode all the time, like growth mindset. So it's like we're just pouncing off ideas and we're talking about how to help and reach more people. So I do appreciate you, Brianna.
Thanks for having me.
All right. See you later.
See ya.
All right. Now I'll stop the recording and then I'll edit this last part out. Hold on. When I figure out how. Hold on. In session. Stop.